was personally pushed by Wang Yin into a horde full of zombies, and eventually bitten to death by them. When I opened my eyes again, the time had actually gone back to a year, before the zombie virus outbreak. Wang Yin looked down at me condescendingly and said, "Lin Qiqi, can you stay away from me? You're so annoying." I slightly curved my lips and replied, "I remember that you're the richest man in City K, right?" He frowned, looking puzzled, and asked, "What's wrong?" I glanced at the gray sky and said, "Within a year, you'll kneel in front of me and beg me. You go and hold off those zombies, you go and feed the zombies, hurry up, go." "Sister, you don't have supernatural powers, what's the use of running away? You're not that selfish, are you?" A force struck from the side of my body, and then I was suddenly thrown into the zombie horde. They frantically tore at my body, and blood beads oozed out from my limbs one by one. This pain made my senses extremely acute. "Get out of here quickly, she won't hold out for long." Wang Yin pulled Lin Qiqi and ran away. With a piece of my clothes hanging from his hand, he desperately reached out to grab them. Ah! A zombie suddenly jumped up and bit off my arm. My finger was still in its mouth, and it was still slightly moving. No! I suddenly opened my eyes, and my whole body was soaked with sweat. Just like a drowning person who suddenly gets air, I greedily breathed. I looked around and subconsciously touched my arm. Everything seemed so peaceful and harmonious. As if everything just now was just a nightmare. "What the hell are you screaming for? Do you want to scare me to death early in the morning?" Lin Qiqi was wearing a nightgown, and her skin was as white as snow. However, her ferocious expression spoiled this purity. I hated her, but at this moment, seeing her scolding me, a trace of relief unexpectedly welled up in my heart. I laughed, pointing at her, my shoulders shaking non-stop. Looking increasingly wild, she backed out of the room and said, "Are you crazy?" I turned my head to look at the time on the calendar. It was July. There was still 1 year until the zombie virus outbreak. The person in the mirror had a delicate and charming makeup. In the past, I always lived cautiously, afraid of attracting others' attention. I always kept my head down, being submissive. I really wasted this beautiful appearance. Lin Qiqi didn't allow me to wear skirts. My clothes were either those she didn't want or large-sized women's clothes. Wearing them made me look like a barrel. I bent my finger and flicked at my stupid reflection in the mirror. The next second, I was stunned because the mirror in front of me disappeared out of thin air. An idea quickly flashed through my mind. Mindy reached out my hand, and the mirror that had disappeared indeed returned to its original position. Ha ha. I tore off my pajamas, took out a skirt from the bottom of the box and put it on. And by the way, put on some makeup. When I walked out of the room, Lin Qiqi was having breakfast. An egg rolled towards my feet with a rattle. She said, "Who told you to dress like this? Are you going to seduce someone? You're just like your mother, a slut." I curved my lips, bent down to pick up the egg, and then threw it backward. Subsequently, a clear sound of the eggshell colliding with the porcelain bowl was heard. "Cherish the resources you have now, maybe before long. This egg will be more valuable than your life." My first stop was Yedu, the largest nightclub in City K. There's no need for a ticket here. A beautiful face is the best ticket of admission. "Give me 10 cups of night fragrance." I twirled the lighter I bought for 1 yuan at the convenience store in my hand. I gently tapped on the bartender was stunned for a second. He slightly raised the corners of my lips and said, "Don't worry, someone will pay for it." 10 cups of night fragrance were neatly placed on the barth. Extreme colors were mixed with the mellow fragrance of the wine. Just one look made people unable to resist being drawn in. Ding, ding, ding. I slid the lighter along the cup wall with a gentle press of my thumb. A small flame sprang up instantly, as if awakening the sleeping factors in the wine glass. The flame disappeared in a flash. The gorgeous sparks and the short-lived warmth created the real night fragrance. Exclamations came from around me, while I stared straight at the man on the second floor, who was leaning against the pillar with a lazy smile on his face. He was my target today. Zhou Tongyin. Just 5 months after the zombie virus outbreak, he established the first alliance by himself. He provided shelter for many displaced people. He was like a god in the troubled times. I had never seen him before, because I had died before I could meet him. Yes, the reason why Lin Qiqi and I were attacked was that we were going to seek refuge with him. We were surrounded on the way in order to win the favor of this man. Lin Qiqi forced me to find out many of his hobbies. For example, the smell of this night fragrance, after being burned by the flame. And for another example, he was the owner of a shooting training hall. He had a profound background, being rich and powerful, and these were exactly what I needed most now. Sure enough, not long after, I was led to the second floor. Alone, Zhou Tong was lounging on the sofa, his voice magnetic yet languid. "You've been looking for me." It was a statement, yes. "What's the matter?" "I need to borrow money." "Zhou Tong." He paused for a second and then laughed. "For borrowing money, go to the bank. I'm a nice guy. I don't run loan sharking businesses, little sister." I scanned the black-clad bodyguards surrounding the room. and finally fixed my eyes on him again. Oh, a nice guy? Well, I'm a nice person too since we're of the same kind. How about a deal? He propped his chin up, a smile in his eyes. Tell me. If you knew in advance what was going to happen a year later, what would you do? Of course, I'd take precautions and prevent. He chuckled. Are you telling me a story? It's the truth. This is exactly what I want to trade with you a year later. Something will happen that will change the whole world, and even all of humanity. I enunciated each word clearly. You're a businessman, you should know this is a profitable deal. Half of Zhou Teng's face was in the shadow, and his eyes were staring intently at me on the surface. I was calm, but actually, my heart was pounding after all. In my previous life, my knowledge of him was only from bits and pieces in the apocalypse, so I wasn't sure if I could make the future king easily believe my incredible story, with just a few words, but there was no way around it. 1 year was too short, and I had a lot to do with Zhou Teng's help. Everything would become much simpler after a while. His lazy voice broke the silence. All right, go ahead. I heaved a sigh of relief and looked around at the people. He waved his hand, and soon there were only the two of us left in the private box. I placed my phone in front of him, showing my bank card number. There's no such thing as a free lunch. I need money. Zhou Teng curled the corners of his mouth. As you said, a businessman doesn't do unprofitable deals. Don't you need to show some sincerity first? I lowered my eyes. Okay, a year later, an unprecedented virus will break out. All living creatures in the world will be involved in this mutation. And I know the exact time it will happen, and what preparations should be made before then. His hand paused, and he tilted his head, indicating for me to continue. I put the phone back again. Give me the money. He chuckled and transferred 2,000 yuan to me. Frowned slightly. What? Think it's too little? Then keep talking. I'll pay you the balance after you finish. You don't believe what I said? Zhou Teng propped his chin with his hand, and his magnetic and pleasant voice filled the private box, leaving aside how ridiculous that thing that's supposed to happen a year later is. Just talking about that virus. Do you know how advanced science, technology, and medicine are nowadays? All living creatures will mutate? You're kidding me. I held my phone and slowly spoke under his teasing gaze. Zhou Teng, from City F. His grandfather was the former chairman of the Central Military Commission. His father is the current head of a war zone. He himself has participated in 4 classified missions after retiring from the military. He went into business and is now the founder of a company. He likes shooting and combat. His moves are sharp every time he kills an enemy. His habitual fatal spot is the head. His most handy weapon is a dagger with 10 thorn vines engraved on it. His most proficient gun. Enough. With every word I didn't say, his face stiffened a bit more. He half closed his eyes. You've investigated me. Indeed, I had specifically collected this information, but that was in my previous life at that time. Zhou Teng was a hero in the hearts of the people across the country. His deeds and habits could be talked about by street kids, but now it was different. Now, those who knew these things were either dead or locked up in some unknown place. Out of sight, I shrugged and told the truth. I don't have that kind of ability. These will be known to everyone in a year. He stared at me for a long time again, and his laziness subsided. Continue. I want 1 million. Okay. At a. July th. A year later, there will be a global power outage. The temperature will reach its peak, and then it will drop sharply. The air will become thin. I suggest you prepare oxygen tanks and down jackets. After the whole process, some humans will turn into zombies. That is to say, the end of the world will come on July th. Zhou Teng frowned tightly. I felt that if I said one more word, he would shoot me in the head right away. I know this sounds crazy, but that's the truth. The second reason I came to you today is that I want you to teach me shooting and combat. The fee will be deducted from the 1 million you just gave me. He didn't say a word. Suddenly, a bodyguard appeared behind me and patted me on the shoulder. Miss, please leave. I sighed and didn't pester any further. Running out of his patience would do me no good. When I reached the door, I still turned my head. Everything I said just now is true since I've received so much money from you. Let me remind you one more thing. When I reached the corner on the first floor, someone blocked my way. Lin Qiqi. I looked up suspiciously when I saw this face. My pupils constricted. The scenes of being torn and eaten flooded my mind, and I seemed to be able to smell the taste of my own blood. I took a step back with a pale face. I'm calling you. Are you deaf? Wang Yin took a step closer. I slightly raised my head, my eyes blood red. He was startled and stopped. What kind of look is that? I turned to leave, but he moved a step to block my way. I said, can you stop pestering me? Even if you chase me here, I won't change my mind. Can you stay away from me and Can in the future? It's really annoying. I sneered. I remember you always said that the Wang family is a noble family, and your family members are all upper-class people. So what? Within a year, you'll kneel down and beg me. Wang Yin stared at me for a while, and then laughed until tears came out. Then a waiter came over and patted him on the shoulder. Sir, please don't make a loud noise in public. Please leave. Wang Yin looked around at the people dancing, singing, playing cards, and making a lot of noise. Just as he opened his mouth, he was covered by several security guards and carried out. When I turned around, Zhou Teng was lazily leaning on the staircase railing. Seeing how confident you were just now, I actually kind of believe what you said. I raised my eyebrows. Cooperate? He tugged at the corners of his mouth. I'm looking forward to it. After leaving Zhou Teng, I went straight to the largest shopping mall in City K, which contained all the daily needed supplies. Hello, is your manager here? The Dagoyan usually didn't follow customers around. Suddenly being called by me, they were jolted out of their doze. What do you want with the manager? I need rice flour, oil, sugar. It's in that area. Go buy yourself 10 tons of each. 10 minutes later, the manager was standing in front of me. Discussing the relevant matters of cooperation, I used Zhou Teng's money to rent mini warehouses and regularly sent trucks to transport food, water, and all kinds of supplies there every week. Within a week, the warehouses were filled. I would give the workers a day off and then rush to these places. After the mirror disappeared out of thin air that day, I discovered that the supernatural power from my previous life had actually been reborn. With Lin Qiqi thought I didn't have supernatural powers. In fact, I did. And it was an extremely rare space type supernatural power, but to protect myself, I had never told anyone I used my supernatural power to collect all the things in the warehouses in the space. The food wouldn't go bad, it would come out exactly the same as when it was put in, and even the temperature wouldn't change. Just like this, over and over again, I slowly stocked up on food for the coming of the apocalypse. Thanks to Zhou Teng's wealth, I could afford such extravagance. However, no matter how powerful the space-type supernatural power was, it was limited. I could only do my best to stock up on supplies, but to survive in the apocalypse, these were far from enough because I had experienced it once. I knew the importance of food, so I spent a week in the library, buying mini books on agricultural planting, and consulting senior agricultural predecessors. I had to build my own agricultural kingdom in the apocalypse. I chose Yin Town, for this Yin Town was my home before I was 7 years old. I lived in this small town with my mother until she passed away. Then I was picked up by the butler sent by the Lin family. I would never forget the first time Lin Dong came to see me. Disgust, aversion, nausea. I was like a stain in his life, an unbearable past. I called him Dad, but he told me with a cold face, "Call me Mr. Lin from now on." I was only stunned for a second, and then gave him a sweet smile. "Okay, Mr. Lin." After turning around, the smile on my face disappeared completely, and my eyes were full of indifference. Lin Dong came to pick me up and take me back to the Lin family, because he was running for a promotion, and was afraid that his opponents would discover me, so he took precautions in advance. But I wanted to stay. I couldn't forget the way my mother tried to call him desperately when she was diagnosed with overwork and died in the hospital. She begged to hear something from him again. But Lin Dong was playing ball with his father-in-law at that time, and didn't even bother to answer her last call. What a good husband. He was just a heartless man. So I wanted to stay. When Lin Dong was about to get promoted, I accidentally exposed myself to the media when Lin Qiqi was showing off. I willingly played the role of the bullied one, and was coincidentally seen by classmates and friends when their family was enjoying a happy time together. I accidentally broke a vase, allowing Mrs. Lin to discover the USB drive containing her husband's amorous affairs. I lived carefully in the shadows, ruining Lin Dong's promotion, spoiling Lin Qiqi's reputation, and driving a wedge between Mrs. Lin and Lin Dong. This seemingly glorious family was actually rotten and stinking inside. But the only thing I never expected was that after being humble for so long, I really thought I only deserved to live in the gutter. So when I met Wang Yin, I rushed towards him regardless of everything, stepping on my own dignity again and again into the mud, forgetting my original pride. It was only when I was dying that I realized that I didn't like him. I just coveted the warmth of that coat in the sunlight. After the rain that day, it covered my bruised skin and the torn to shreds clothes. Little girl, we're here. I blinked and came back to my senses. Thank you, uncle. Yin Town looked the same as when I left. It was surrounded by mountains, backed by a water source, and had fertile soil, which was the most suitable place to build an agricultural base. I went to the bank to withdraw the dowry my mother had saved for meeting. The money left after buying food I could still buy a piece of land. Behind Yin Town was a big mountain. The young people had all gone out to work, and the old people rarely went to the fields, so a large area here was deserted. When I proposed to buy the land, the villagers readily agreed. I also hired some uncles to dig waterways and wells in the mountains. It took 3 months to solve the water source problem. I went home, left some food there, and then returned to city. In the apocalypse, having just food and resources was gonna be a in my previous life. I had seen too many people kill each other for a steamed bun, and people being targeted because they had resources. People's hearts are unpredictable. You never know whether the person in front of you is a human or a ghost. So I came to keep my appointment with Zhou Teng. I needed to train myself well before the apocalypse came and have enough ability to protect my things. Bang! 9.8 rings. Good aim. I took off my goggles and turned my head to look at Zhou Teng. This gun is too light. He raised his eyebrows and fired a shot. 10 rings. This model is sufficient for you. I patted him on the shoulder with the gun barrel. Step aside. He took a step back. Bang, bang, bang. 10 targets, all hitting the bulls. Wood chips flew everywhere. I promptly turned around and pointed the gun at him. How about it? His eyes, which were usually half closed, were rarely wide open. His long and narrow phoenix eyes were distinct in black and white. His face was clearly cold and seemed difficult to approach. Yet there was always a faint smile on his lips. How does a young lady from a wealthy family like you know so much? I died once after experiencing a lot. You just learn. In my previous life, while protecting Lin Qiqi and Wang Yin during their escape, I did everything from throwing stones at zombies, using a slingshot, to engaging in hand-to-hand combat. Zhou Teng looked at me. I'm starting to believe your wild tales more and more. Wild tales or not, after all, you bought them with $1 million. He lowered his head and chuckled. My marksmanship was taught by my old man. You have to think carefully if you want to learn. Zhou Teng was very serious. Once you step into my circle, don't even think about getting out. It will be very bitter and tiring. Devil training? I can't wait. He curled the corners of his mouth. Don't go back to the Lin family starting from today. The training will be carried out within the limit of your 1-year prophecy. Welcome to the new world, little savage. Zhou Teng was a man of his word. After the training started, He never slacked off for a single day during the days with him. I increasingly understood why he could carve out a haven in the troubled times in my previous life. Because he was truly born to be a kingbang. As I fell to the ground, I couldn't help but let out a muffled sound looking up. Zhou drew another stroke on the wall. The entire wall was densely covered with Zheng characters. You lost again. I stared at the bruise on his face and nodded faintly, then drew a stroke on the other wall. You're not bad either. You've been beaten into a pig's head again. He tried to smile but pulled the wound on his mouth. He wiped it with his finger and softly clicked his tongue. Shooting competition tonight? I picked up the backpack on the ground and slung it over my shoulder. No, it's time for us to go back. I raised my hand to block the scorching sun. The ground was baked with cracks, and waves of heat surged in the air, making it hard to breathe. The weather is getting worse and worse. You should make early plans after we go back. Zhou reached out to flick me, but I subconsciously dodged. He paused for a second and smiled. The experts said this is just a normal phenomenon caused by environmental pollution. Instead of worrying about when the end of the world will come, it's better to think about how to improve the environment. I spread my hands. I wonder who has been gradually moving the family's foundation to the northwest within this year. I heard that dozens of warehouses of supplies have been stockpiled. Nonsense. He slung his own bag over his shoulder. It's clearly hundreds of warehouses. I sneered. This guy really didn't deserve the title of King of Hell, given to him by others. Zhou asked me to go to the northwest with him, but I refused. It's good to have someone to protect you, but I prefer to hold my own safety in my hands. I came to Qingqing alone and rented an apartment, using the last of my time to explore. On the night of July, T sat in the apartment with a knife beside me, my eyes staring straight at the clock on the wall. The hands of the clock turned bit by bit, looking eerie and urgent in the quiet night. 1918. 3-2-1 ding. At exactly a.m., all the electrical appliances in the house, as if receiving some signal, stopped working simultaneously. Without the air conditioner, the room quickly became stuffy, and the air was so thin that it seemed to silently take away everyone in their sleep. I took out the oxygen tank I had prepared long ago and put it on. This process lasted for about 15 minutes. After the thin pressure disappeared, the air became even quieter. There was no chirping of insects or birds. The world seemed to have pressed the pause button. I threw away the oxygen tank, put on my down jacket, and as soon as I zipped it up, a wild wind howled outside. Large hailstones crackled down from the sky. The car alarms in the community rang out simultaneously. Along with the sound of breaking glass, there were bustling voices outside. I don't know which household opened the window, and then there was a scream. This scream seemed to break the shackles in the apartment building. Someone shouted monster, and someone cried for help. Before I knew it, there was a blizzard outside. The temperature dropped sharply, and a thick layer of ice formed even on the guardrails. Gradually, many things that were neither human nor ghost gathered in the community parking lot, and along the street they growled, their eyes blood red and vacant, and their movements were somewhat sluggish. These were the first batch of early zombies. They were not very powerful, and had no consciousness, but mutation processes like today would occur again in the future with each evolution. The zombies that survived would eventually develop consciousness, and even supernatural powers. I sent a message in the property owners group. The end of the world has come. Many people have turned into zombies, but some people have also evolved supernatural powers. You can try to focus and see if you have evolved. If the people around you have red eyes and stiff limbs, don't get close to them. They are zombies and are no longer your relatives. Soon someone replied, "What are you scaring people for? Be careful, or I'll call the police and have you arrested." That's right. Are you new here? The little girl looks nice, but her thoughts are so bad. The little girl has watched too many movies, right? I sneered, threw my phone aside, picked up my knife, and walked out of the community. Now, there is no absolutely safe place in the world. I can only create my own peace. That guy Zhou still had some doubts about my words until the end, and didn't give me a gun at all. But at this time, without a powerful weapon, no matter how strong the body is, it will get injured. I had no choice but to get one myself. There were already many zombies wandering in the community, but these primary zombies were not a threat. They were chopped to death by me before they could get close. There were continuous screams from upstairs. They pointed at me and shouted murderer. And there were also those whose family members had mutated and were gradually assimilated in their cries, help, help, me. I turned around. A boy stretched out his hand to me in horror. I quickly walked over and grabbed him. Quick. Ah! He pushed me back and stumbled forward. I first chopped off the hand of the zombie that grabbed me, then twirled the knife, and the head of the zombie behind me rolled along a blood path at the end of the blood trace. The boy lay with his eyes wide open under the mouth of another zombie. I wiped the blood splashed on my face and walked out. I no longer cared about the continuous cries for help from the residential building. I'm not a god. I can't save everyone. On the contrary, I'm a selfish person. I also want to live. Qingqing is close to the forest and has a very confidential military supply. In my previous life, when the zombies broke out, the people here couldn't resist the attack of their mutated comrades, and almost all died at that time. The signal tower was still working, and it was reported on the mobile phone every day. However, since the power was cut off all over the world, the mobile phone didn't last long. Finally, everyone lost contact and lived cautiously in the troubled times. The first batch of zombies were slow. I didn't encounter any difficult problems along the way. When I arrived at the place, as expected, all the people had been bitten to death. I picked up the gun beside the corpse and carefully hid behind a big tree. Soon, I saw a zombie crawling on the ground, devouring the internal organs of its companion. The air was filled with a violent smell. The ground was covered with blood, disgusting and terrifying. The zombies here had received professional training before they died, and their Speed and ability were much stronger than ordinary zombies. If I fired a shot, I might attract other zombies. I tucked the gun into my pants and slowly approached with a knife. The zombie on the ground didn't notice my approach and was still stuffing pieces of meat into its mouth. I raised the knife and chopped down hard unexpectedly. This guy's head was so hard he mechanically turned his head to look at me, opened his stinking mouth, and growled. I chopped again, and his head rolled twice in the muddy water. It seemed that he still didn't realize that his head had been moved. His eyes were white, and he bared his teeth at me. A strong wind blew from behind. I sidestepped to avoid it, and squinted at these startled zombies walking step by step. I clicked my tongue, pulled out the gun from my waist, and without hesitation, shot them in the head. I picked up the remaining guns on the ground, and stepped over the corpses, all over the ground to the outside of a warehouse. Kicking open the door, I gently slid my hand on the supply shelf, and the things on it immediately disappeared out of thin air. Suddenly, I heard a soft cry. I turned around and pointed the gun at the unexpected guest outside the door. He slowly raised his hands. Don't shoot, don't shoot. When I saw his appearance, my heart trembled. The person outside the door was about cm tall, wearing a black hooded sweatshirt. His face was deathly pale, yet he was trying his best to keep a smile. 2 ears on his head were trembling slightly, and the antlers beside his ears were standing upright. His skin was different from that of a normal person. There were some spots on his neck, looking like a sick deer. This was an orc. In my previous life, there were also orcs, but their number was extremely rare because they happened to be beside the mutated animals when the end of the world came, and were also mutating themselves. When the two were extremely compatible, they would evolve into orcs, but the probability was extremely low. The whole process was also more dangerous than ordinary evolution. Those who were lucky would finally become orcs, and those who were not would only die. I squinted, keeping the gun pointed in that direction. The air was eerily quiet. I could even hear the sound of him swallowing saliva. I pointed in his direction, my finger on the gun, gently pulling the trigger. Bang! When the gunshot rang out, the orc almost closed his eyes. At the same time, a splash of blood splashed on his face. His eyelashes trembled slightly, shaking off the blood beads on them. After a while, he slowly opened his eyes. The horror in his eyes gradually spread across his whole face. Beside him, a zombie was lying. The blood just now was from this zombie. I put away the gun and walked over. He patted his chest, let out a long sigh of relief, and then grabbed Meth. Little dear's eyes were full of tears. Are you a fairy? I uncomfortably withdrew my hand. This guy immediately clung to me again. My name is Lu Yao. I'm a forest ranger. I was rescuing an injured sick deer. I don't know what happened, but I fainted. When I woke up, I became like this. I bambanda. Ed, you've mutated into an orc. His eyes widened in horror, and he was about to cry again. I frowned, and he pursed his lips and held back his tears. It's not safe here. I still have things to do. Take these and go in the northwest direction. I took out some supplies and handed them to him. The northwest direction was the base camp of Zhou Teng's alliance. If he had the luck to reach there, he would basically be out of danger. He stared at the things that appeared out of thin air in my hand. You're really a fairy, right? I stuffed the things to him and walked forward on my own. I know where the things you're looking for are. I turned around. He scratched his ear, and his agile big eyes shone in the dark. You're looking for bullets and guns, right? I'll take you there. After making several turns, we arrived at a basement. After struggling to open the door, I snapped my fingers, and all the things inside were taken away. Seeing me using my supernatural power, Lu Yao immediately became star-eyed, pointing at my hand. In this room, talking incoherently, looking at his appearance, I couldn't help but chuckle and felt inexplicably relaxed. This is a supernatural power. If nothing unexpected happens, you also have one. Orcs are like the darlings of heaven. Most of them will evolve supernatural powers and are very adaptable to the environment of the end of the world. For instance, when I was still wrapped in a thick coat, Lu Yao could just wear a sweatshirt. As soon as I finished speaking, he imitated my gesture, spread his hands, and exerted a sudden force. A dazzling white light flashed. I grabbed his sleeve and ran. Just as we reached the door, almost simultaneously, a loud explosion occurred behind us. Our ears hurt from the shock. I patted the dirt off myself. The smell of gunpowder still lingered in the air, and a mushroom cloud rose in the sky. When Lu Yao reached out his hand, I subconsciously dodged. He pursed his lips in grievance. I'm sorry. Then he gently wiped the mud off my head. His peerlessly beautiful face was stained with a bit of dirt, looking charmingly broken. I secretly sighed. So your supernatural power is? He cautiously extended a finger, and a wisp of white-blue lightning coiled around it, crackling. When I looked back at him, my gaze had changed. What kind of luck did this guy have? He not only successfully evolved, but also obtained the rarest lightning-type supernatural power. Don't let others know. I stopped halfway, then waved my hand. Forget it. Your supernatural power is so powerful that even if it's discovered, others will suffer. Then what will happen if others find out about the fairy's supernatural power? Space-type supernatural power also belongs to a rare category. As the strength grows, the amount of things that can be stored will also increase. This is undoubtedly something everyone desires in the apocalypse. Even Zhou Teng doesn't know this secret. I looked at him indifferently and raised the gun in my hand. That person will die. Then, will I die? Are you going to tell others? His head shook like a rattle, and the fleshy horns on his head swayed along. He couldn't resist reaching out and rubbing them. They felt so good. Then his ears visibly turned red, so red that the blood vessels inside could be seen. I flicked one of his ears, and he howled, covering his ears. I chuckled. The strong wind stopped, and the snow stopped falling. The first wave of mutation ended. Although it was July, everywhere was covered in white bone, chillingly cold. The scene was desolate at a glance. Fairy, where are you going next? Can I follow you? He immediately added. I helped you find the bullets. I am a hero. You almost blew me up too. He fell silent, and even his ears drooped. I patted the snow off myself and turned to leave Lin Qiqi. The person behind me paused for a second, then caught up and chirped in my ear. Is that your name? Then can I call you Qiqi? Where are we going now? Is the outside already occupied by zombies? Do you have? Shut up. Oh. Lu Yao and I headed east all the way on the way. We picked up a car and soon arrived at Yin Town. It was like a completely different place from the last time I came. The beautiful fields were in a mess. The soil was tinged with blood. Red, there were human corpses and zombies in the fields. They came howling. I raised my hand and fired several shots, then entered the town along the trail of corpses and severed limbs. There were little snowflakes on Lu Yao's slightly curled eyelashes. He carefully tugged at my sleeve. I gathered my clothes. Let's go. The once lively and warm streets in the town were deserted. There was a faint smell of blood in the biting air. Several broken cars were parked on the street, with corpses inside. Presumably, they had tried to escape by car, but were finally bitten to death. We also encountered quite a few zombies along the way. Lu Yao always grabbed my clothes and hid beside me, really wasting his powerful supernatural power. I raised my gun and shot them one by one in the head. Suddenly, I saw a ray of yellow light emitting from the head of a fallen zombie. Stay here and don't move if you're scared. Find a place to hide. I jumped onto a car and swept my leg towards a zombie. The zombie dodged. They were no longer just mechanically and numbly biting people, but started to resist, and their speed had also greatly increased. I drew a knife from my waist and flew down from above, stabbing it into the zombie's throat. He stretched out his hands to grab me, held the knife handle, and pulled it back, forcefully splitting open his head. Sure enough, there was a small yellow crystal nucleus lying inside. This indicated that this zombie had experienced a second stage mutation. Lu Yao lifted my hand. He don't know where he got a handkerchief from, and gently wiped the bloodstains for me. It was too dangerous just now. Why didn't you use your gun? I withdrew my hand. There's a crystal nucleus in his head. This thing will be of great use in the future. Shooting would have shattered it. He looked at me with a frown. Disapprovingly, I raised my eyebrows, with determination in my eyes. Finally, he sighed and muttered softly, "It seems I have to practice my supernatural power well in the future." I walked to the door of a small store and kicked the roller shutter door. Don't hide. It's not a solution to go on like this. Come out and help me clean up the corpses. Otherwise, the bitten people are likely to turn into zombies. A dustpan trembled. Finally, a pair of eyes appeared from under it. After looking at me, they retracted. I clicked my tongue and directly lifted the dustpan, pulling out the person underneath. Don't bite me. The person covered his eyes with his hand, and the mobile phone and stand beside him fell to the ground with a clatter. It seemed he was doing a live broadcast. He shakily moved one hand away. His eyes lit up when he saw me, and he opened his hands. Master. Ah! I don't know. When Lu Yao stood beside me, he slapped the person's outstretched hand. A flash of pale electric light passed by. The person on the ground looked at Lu Yao, his expression changing from shock to fear. I just thought he was scared because it was his first time seeing an orc form. I put one hand on Lu Yao's shoulder. He turned around and smiled at me. Sister Qiqi. I don't know why, but I always felt that Lu Yao was a bit strange, as if he had just become a different person. Supernatural powers can be used against enemies, but not against the same kind. His smile froze. Got it. I turned around and said to the person on the ground, "Are you a local?" He nodded, but his eyes were always on Lu Yao. He shielded Lu Yao behind me. What's your name? Yang Zai. Do you know how many survivors there are here? Yes, we've been hiding in the town for a long time. There are probably still more than 20 people alive. Are they safe? Yang Zai shook his head. I don't know. I only saw them when I was running away. Later, everyone just cared about running for their own lives. Who would care if others were safe? Then lead the way. We'll go to the place where you saw them and look for them. I'm not going. It's too scary. That thing can bite off a person's head in one bite. I'll just stay here. I am not going anywhere. I frowned just as I was about to say something. Yang Zai glanced at me, his lips trembling, almost crying. I'll go then. I looked behind me and met a pair of deer-like eyes. Lu Yao raised his lips and smiled, showing two small tiger teeth. He bent down and took Yang Zai's hand. Yang Zai's body trembled. He subconsciously leaned towards me. Lu Yao smiled at him, and he quietly moved a bit further away, not daring to look up anymore. Was Lu Yao that scary? He was clearly very cute. Let's go. During the process of looking for people, I learned that Yang Zai was a native of Yin Town. After graduating, he ran a small store and worked as a part-time self-media person. He was a small internet celebrity. Everyone in the town knew him. After the zombie virus broke out, he didn't mutate. In plain terms, he neither turned into a zombie nor evolved supernatural powers. The environment in the apocalypse was very harsh. Everywhere was covered with thick ice. The sky was covered with gray clouds, as if it was about to fall. The cold wind carried ice particles and drifted around. The howling sound of whoosh, whoosh filled the ears. Yang Zai was shivering from the cold. He pointed shakily at a square in front of him. I met them here last time. Several people were being held and bitten by zombies. There probably aren't many left alive. Ed and stuffed a cotton padded coat to him. I picked this up on the roadside when we came just now. You can borrow it first. Thank you, Chi, boss. Yang Zai put on the clothes while glancing at Lu Yao. He always felt that there was something between these two people. Behind my back, there was indeed a lot of blood in the square, even in the ice and snow. The strong smell of blood couldn't be covered up. The ground was full of severed limbs. Lu Yao and I were used to it, but Yang Zai vomited his guts out. You wait here. We'll go in and look. No, there are zombies everywhere outside. I don't want to. Lu Yao smiled at him. Mr. Yang, most of the zombies outside have been killed. You're safe. Just wait here, okay? Yang Zai swallowed his saliva and nodded carefully, making a pitiful sound from his nasal cavity, looking at me pleadingly. Let's go together, it's really not safe for him to be alone. Yes, boss, no problem, boss. Yang Zai fled forward. Lu Yao kept staring at him. What are you looking at? He blinked his eyes. Why does Sister Qiqi care about him? I'm not caring about him. I would do the same for anyone. We exist in the apocalypse. Every living person is a treasure to fight against those zombies. We must unite. The power of a group is always stronger than that of an individual. So as long as we meet more living people, Sister Qiqi will protect them too? It's not about who protects home, it's mutual. Lu Yao lowered his head, and his voice was a bit cold. I see them. Let's quickly find the living people and find them all. I put my hand on his head and ruffled his hair. What's wrong with you? You seem strange since Yang Zai appeared. He smiled until his eyes curved. Sister Qiqi, you're overthinking. Let's go quickly, otherwise Mr. Yang will be bitten by zombies. The square was very quiet. There was no one in the surrounding shops. Not even zombies. We groped our way deeper except for some bloodstains and charred unknown objects. We found nothing. Yang Zai's face turned pale. Could they all be dead? After all, they were fellow villagers and friends he had grown up with. He called out the names of several people towards the square while calling. He started to cry. Stop crying, you shouted so loudly just now, and didn't attract any zombies. At least that's a good sign. Let's go deeper. The deeper we went, the more obvious the burnt stench was, and the more black charred objects there were. We had reached the basement of the square. The sound of water droplets hitting the ground was particularly prominent in the eerie dark room. The temperature in the basement was higher than that outside. I reached out my hand to feel it. At least a normal person wouldn't freeze to death here. Boom. A strong light hit, and then a burning sensation was felt on the face. I pulled the two people beside me to dodge the flames with the fire. The situation in the basement could be seen clearly. The flames were emitted from a middle-aged man's hand not far behind him. Some people were gathered, holding knives, sticks, and hoes. Although they were disheveled, their eyes carried a fierce look. Whoosh. Another force hit our backs this time. I didn't dodge. The force hit my back completely. My back was all wet. The high water pressure shook my internal organs, causing great pain. Lu Yao supported me. One of his hands was clenched into a fist. Crackling, the person behind sent another water pressure. Lu Yao reached out his hand. The electric light entangled with the water column. The blue-white light illuminated the person behind with a scream. A girl of about 14 or 15 years old covered her hand and fell. Lulu. Lu Yao punched down. The electric light illuminated the entire basement, and also reflected Lulu's pale face. Lu Yao, stop. I blocked in front of Lulu. Lu Yao's hand stopped half an inch from my face. The remaining electric current made my nose tingle. I saw a flash of violence in his eyes. He slowly lowered his hand and tugged at my sleeve. Sister Qiqi, don't be angry. His eyes were downcast, his eyelashes fluttering. There was a teardrop on his fair face. My originally inquisitive gaze softened somewhat. I could only first check Lulu's injury. Water conducts electricity. One of Lulu's arms was lacerated. If I hadn't stopped him in time just now, Lu Yao really intended to kill her. Lulu, Uncle Yin. Yang Zai was stunned with fright. He grabbed the middle-aged man's hand and explained, they're not bad people. Uncle Yin snorted coldly, bent down to pick up Lulu, and returned to the corner. There was a woman in a wheelchair there. She took Lulu with eyes full of distress, and gently stroked her injured arm. A gentle fluorescent light wrapped around it. After a while, the bleeding from her hand actually stopped. The woman shook her head at Uncle Yin. The injury is too severe. I can't cure it all at once. After she finished speaking, Uncle Yin looked at Lu Yao even more unfavorably. I blocked in front of Lu Yao, interrupting his line of sight. Uncle Yin, I'm Qiqi. Do you remember me? The people in the basement looked up at me. After a while, the woman who could heal spoke. You're Jiang Li's daughter, right? You look so much like her. I fixed my gaze on her and asked uncertainly, Aunt Zhou? It's me. Your leg. She smiled. There was an accident when I went to support the disaster-stricken area. It became disabled. Her gentle smile coincided with the blurry face in my memory at that time. Aunt Zhou was the most capable doctor in Yun Town, optimistic, cheerful, and gentle to everyone. We thought something had happened to Yang Zai when we heard him howling outside just now. It was a misunderstanding since they're Qiqi's friends. They're not bad people either. Old Yen, don't scare the kids. I'm sorry, Aunt Zhou, for hurting Lulu. Lulu fainted in Aunt Zhou's arms. She sighed. This is a poor, fated child. Her father turned into a zombie and bit her mother to death. Then she used her supernatural power on her father. Alas, after running out, this child has stopped talking much. She rushes forward without caring about her life when she encounters zombies. Water was dripping tick-tock. In the basement, it was Uncle Yan's fire type supernatural power that melted the ice outside. There were some bread bags on the slightly damp ground. They should be the food they found. Some people were huddled in the corner. It seemed that Uncle Yen and Lulu had been protecting them all these days. Aunt Zhou, Uncle Yen, when we came, those charred things outside were the zombies you killed, right? No wonder there are fewer zombies in Yun Town than outside. Yes, old Yan's fire can instantly burn those zombies to death, but there are too many of them, so we can only hide. Are these all the remaining survivors in Yun Town? I don't know. We just picked up those we met when we went out to find food. We don't know how many people are still alive outside. Aunt Zhou, it's not a solution to keep hiding here. Are you willing to go out with me and drive the zombies out of Yun Town? Before Aunt Zhou could speak, Uncle Yin pushed me away. It's easy to say. There are old people and children here. How can we fight against the zombies outside? If you want to die, go die by yourself. Don't drag others along. After he finished speaking, the crowd began to whisper. He hooked my lips into a smile. You're right. But I didn't say I would let the villagers fight the zombies either. He frowned and looked at me. Uncle Yin, if I'm not mistaken, you haven't eaten for a long time, have you? The people in the basement fell silent and lowered their heads one by one. We haven't eaten for a long time, so what? Can we fill our stomachs by going out with you? All the food outside has been destroyed by the zombies. Are you going to make us eat human flesh? My eyes turned slightly cold, but I still had a smile on my face. I can make you full. Just because you say you can, you can? Anyone can talk big. Aunt Joe tugged at his sleeve, signaling him not to say too much. He turned his head, and his voice didn't weaken at all. Am I wrong? As soon as Jiangli died, she couldn't wait to follow her rich father. Even the funeral was arranged by the neighbors. Can the words of such an ungrateful person be believed? She might be up to no good when she comes back now. I paused for a second, then smiled sweetly. If you don't believe me, there's nothing I can do, then just starve. I turned my head. Lu Yao. Coming, Sister Qiqi. Lu Yao picked up the plastic bag on the ground and followed me to sit in the corner. The plastic bag was filled with the food I had taken out in advance. There were steaming chicken legs, white rice, as well as sandwiches, Coke. We ate slowly. The dark and damp basement was gradually filled with the smell of food. Besides the sound of the two of us eating, there were also occasional sounds of swallowing saliva. I held a chicken leg and raised my eyebrows at Uncle Yin. Yangzai, come over and eat with us. I also have hot dogs and small cakes, by the way. Do you want to drink milk tea? There's a big cup here. As soon as I finished speaking, I simultaneously felt several pairs of eyes looking over. Full of hunger, Yangzai stood next to Aunt Zhou, looked at Uncle Yin, and then reluctantly looked at the chicken leg in my hand. He waved his hand in. No need, boss, I'm not hungry. Growl. This was really awkward. Uncle Yan's face was so gloomy that it seemed to be dripping water. Old Yin. Aunt Zhou gave him a meaningful look. He glanced at the people who were starving and lying on the ground, then pursed his lips and came over as if making up his mind. Is what you said just now true? I put down the chicken leg and clapped my hands. Which words? He gritted his teeth. That if we listen to you, you'll make everyone full. Originally, yes. I curled my lips, but now I suddenly don't want to. You. Uncle Yan's face turned red with anger. I put one hand on my knee and supported my chin with the other. Looking at him, his hands hung down by his sides, clenched into fists. After a while, he let go and lowered his head. Miss Lin, I'm sorry I was too rude just now. Please forgive me. I stood up with a smile and pretended to support him. Uncle Yin, you're overreacting. It's just a small matter. I won't take it to heart. Lu Yao chuckled beside me. Uncle Yin looked at him even more irritably. With a deep Sichuan character frown between his eyebrows, I shook my head helplessly. He stuck out his tongue. I put some food in my house. It should be enough for us to last for a while. How much food can your house hold? I pushed the door open with a bang, and the scene inside successfully silenced everyone. This room wasn't big, but it was filled with rice, oil, and other daily necessities both inside and outside. Where did you get so many things? Don't worry about where these supplies came from anyway. I won't break my promise. Uncle Yin called on people to move the things out. He asked, what are your plans next? The dilapidated town was full of bricks, tiles, and electric poles. Bloodstains and corpses were everywhere. I pointed to all this. Eat enough, find other people, and start over. I settled the sick and weak villagers and led the people with supernatural powers in the team to search for the remaining survivors. 3 days later, we found several more young people. When they were found, they were resisting the zombies. We heard that they originally had 15 people, but now only 5 were left. Yin town was neither too big nor too small. However, by the time we found other people, many had either been killed or starved to death. The efficiency was too low. Sister Qiqi, I have an idea. Lu Yao blinked at May. A few hours later, he pulled me to the town's broadcasting station. I used to study some electrical appliances. Elodie fixed this during my break time. He stretched out a hand with my electricity. As soon as his finger was placed on it, the radio emitted a harsh current sound. A few seconds later, his voice rang out throughout the town. Hello, hello, can you hear me? Dear friends in Yin town, this is the home of Miss Lin Qiqi, located at No. Yulin village. Some of the survivors of Yin town have gathered here. If you hear this broadcast, please come here. We will provide you with the best protection and keep you from hunger and cold. But remember, only move when it's safe. If there are zombies threatening you around, please try to put a red and eye-catching mark in your hiding place. We will come to rescue you. Lu Yao repeated this patiently over and over again. His clear jawline and Adam's apple moved up and down with his words. I don't know how long it took. He cut off the power and leaned on my shoulder, as if he had no bones. Sister Qiqi, I'm so tired. I was still a bit unaccustomed to such a close distance, but looking at his eyes that were too tired to open, the hand I used to push him away just couldn't come down. How did you think of this? He smiled. I was also observing when we were looking for people. Broadcasting like this can not only make sounds to attract zombies, but also let everyone know that there's a shelter here. As long as it's something you want to do, I will help you. I lowered my eyes and pursed my lips. Lu Yao, I've wanted to ask for a long time. Why did you try to kill Lulu that day? The person on my shoulder froze. His smile gradually disappeared. He seemed a bit nervous. Sister Qiqi, I'm sorry. I was afraid she would hurt you. He lowered his head, and I couldn't see the expression in his eyes. I know I'm different from others. They were all afraid of me and don't want to talk to me. Don't want you to get hurt. I only have you. Don't ignore me. I looked at his watery eyes and finally just sighed. Okay, don't do this again in the future. He smiled through his tears. Okay. Also, Lu Yao, you're no different from others. You're not scary either in the apocalypse. Orcs are the darlings of heaven. You shouldn't feel inferior. Because of this, get along well with everyone, and they will like you. Got it, Sister Qiqi. With the help of the broadcast, it became much more convenient for us to find people. And many people also came to us on their own initiative. According to statistics, there were currently people in Yin town, among which people had supernatural powers. We cleared all the zombies in Yin town, and mobilized everyone to clean the streets and renovate the houses 3 months later. Yuntown took on a new look. The original one-story houses disappeared and were replaced by various bases. People with earth type and water type supernatural powers were assigned to the vegetable planting base. I distributed the prepared seeds to them and found experienced old people to teach them planting hand in just 3 months. The base was already full of greenery. The medical base led by Aunt Jo was also gradually established. However, healing type supernatural powers were too rare. There was only Aunt Jo with such supernatural powers in the entire base. The others were all people with relevant experience. Before, there was also a base specifically for protecting everyone's safety, which gathered various types of supernatural beings and was responsible for going out to kill zombies and save people. We spread out from Yin Town as the center and rescued the zombies and people in the surrounding town. Slowly, somehow the news spread outside, and many people came from afar to join us. The number of people in Yin Town was increasing, and our base was getting bigger and bigger. Boss, a group of people came outside the town and said they're your friends. My hand holding the pen paused. My friends? There were several military vehicles parked outside the town, filled with people. The man in the lead was holding a gun. The cold wind was blowing, lifting the scarf beside him. He was unrestrained and natural, with a lazy aura emanating from his bones. His cold eyes were offset by his always upturned lips. Looking ruffian and handsome, I narrowed my eyes and rushed forward with a sweeping kick. He bent down to dodge, casually threw away the gun, and then started fighting with me. If there were martial arts experts present, they could tell that his moves were very similar to mine. We fought fiercely, and the people on both sides looked at each other in dismay, tightening their grip on the weapons in their hands. Bang! I was knocked down by him, and he was also hit by me. We lay on the ground, glanced at each other, and simultaneously burst into laughter. I cast a sidelong glance at Zhou Teng. With your hair cut, you really look like a tyrant in troubled times. Zhou Teng got up, bent halfway, and extended his hand. Your close combat skills have improved a lot after not seeing you for a year. I grasped his hand and used the strength to stand up. It's all because of my master's excellent teaching. You're a glib little swindler. Seeing the change in our atmosphere, the people on both sides heaved a sigh of relief. Yangzai patted his chest. When I saw you two start fighting as soon as you met, I thought some enemies had come to the door. I chuckled. This is Zhou Teng, my friend. I turned to look at him. Why are you here? Isn't your base camp in the northwest? Zhou Teng rubbed his face, which was stiff from the cold. Alas, who made Miss Zhou's great reputation spread as far as the northwest, thousands of miles away. I'm here to seek support early, aren't I? I punched him in the chest. Speak properly. He smiled. Okay, probably about 7 months ago. I saw you online. I came over as soon as I finished my work. 7 months ago? Yangzai timidly raised his hand. Boss, it seems that the day you and Brother Lu found me, I was doing a live broadcast. It should be that time. I remembered Yangzai had a mobile phone and a stand that day. You came all the way here. It can't be just to take a look at me, right? Zhou Teng slightly lowered his head, with the corners of his lips slightly raised. The situation in the northwest has been more or less settled. I want to take you there. I was taken aback. Yangzai's teasing eyes flitted between us. I clicked my tongue, and was about to hit him as soon as I raised my hand. It was grasped. The icy touch was even more memorable than the cold wind. Lu Yao held my wrist, but his eyes were always on Zhou Teng. There was a smile on his lips, yet his eyes were chillingly cold. Qiqi, who is this uncle? He had always called me Sister Qiqi. Why did he suddenly change his address today? Also, what the hell was uncle? Although Zhou Teng was a few years older than us, with his handsome face, he could never be called uncle. Zhou Teng extended his hand. Zhou Teng, little Qiqi's male. I frowned. He smiled. Friend. Lu Yao curled his lips. What a coincidence. So am I. The two of them stared at each other. Although they were both smiling, the smell of gunpowder was extremely strong. All right. As soon as I opened my mouth, Zhou Teng's gaze fell back on me. You haven't answered me yet. When are we leaving? I opened my mouth, and a voice came from the side. She won't leave. After saying that, Lu Yao turned to look at me, with lights flickering in his eyes. Right, Sister Qiqi? Lu Yao seemed to have some kind of magic. Every time I looked into his incredibly clean eyes, I could always relax infinitely. Whether she leaves or not isn't up to you. The two of them were about to clash again. I quickly asked Yangzai to take the people in to rest. Zhou Teng, well, he's my friend, confidant, and benefactor to some extent. He's the one who made me who I am today. Lu Yao looked at me, his eyes curving. I understand. Sister Qiqi, I won't put you in a difficult position. I'll go and apologize to Mr. Zhou. No need, you didn't. It's okay for me. Sister also hopes that we can get along well, right? There was something strange about what he said. He nodded in a daze. By the time I came to my senses, Lu Yao had disappeared. I searched for them for more than 10 minutes, and finally found them in the vegetable base on the back hill. Lu Yao was lying on the ground. The vegetable field beneath him was completely destroyed. There was blood at the corner of his mouth. A look of astonishment appeared on Zhou Teng's usually lazy face. I know I'm an orc and not worthy of Sister Qiqi, but I just want to stay by her side. I don't want to leave, please. Zhou Teng frowned tightly the moment he saw me. The confusion in his eyes dissipated and turned into amusement. So you can bless me and little Qiqi to grow old together hand in hand? Well, I agree. You can follow us and watch us be happy until we're old. I took a fruit from the tree and threw it over. All right, stop teasing him. Sister Qiqi. Lu Yao turned around, his big eyes glistening with tears. I helped him up. He pointed at Zhou Teng and complained he hit me. Zhou Teng looked at him, with a faint smile on his lips, and an obscure look in his eyes. I cast a sidelong glance at him. Let's go back first. Along the way, Lu Yao cried to me, saying that Zhou Ting bullied him because of his powerful supernatural power, and even ruined the food that his friends had painstakingly grown. He almost directly told me, "Drive this bastard out quickly." In the base office, I sighed and turned to look at him. "Did Zhou Ting really hit you?" He pointed to the wound on his face. "He did." I didn't say anything and just looked at him. After a while, he slowly lowered his hand, and his eyes dimmed. "You don't believe me?" The fighting marks in the vegetable base do seem to be caused by ice-type supernatural power, but with Zhou Teng's strength, the destructive power would be far more than that. If I'm not mistaken, Lulu helped you, right? She used her supernatural power, and then opened the temperature shield in an ultra-low temperature environment. It's not impossible for water-type supernatural power to be faked, and based on my understanding of Zhou Teng, he wouldn't fight with you. Lu Yao's face was stern. His hands hanging by his sides were tightly clenched into fists, and his voice was low. "In the end, you just don't believe mice that person really that important?" I was stunned by his shout. The violence in his eyes was once again nakedly displayed in front of Meso. "I wasn't wrong last time in the basement, Lu Yao." He gently curled the corners of his lips. "Sister Qiqi, you said that you wouldn't leave me if you break your promise. I'll be very angry." There was a crackling sound in the office. Lu Yao was surrounded by electricity. He turned his neck. His eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of mist, making them hard to see clearly, yet easy to sink into. I gradually felt my consciousness blurring. Lu Yao slowly approached. Mei's voice was low, like a water-stained feather, tickling my ear. "Go to sleep. Everything will be fine when you wake up." His fingertips gently touched my temple. After a numb sensation, my eyes went dark, and I lost consciousness. When I woke up again, I was lying on a bed. This was Lu Yao's room. My hands were tightly bound, and an electric net covered the entire bed. As long as I made a big move, I would get an electric shock, let alone think about escaping. What on earth did Lu Yao want to do? I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what had happened these days. Everything was too coincidental. How could a forest ranger know where the military supplies were placed? Why, after he had been in the base for so long, was everyone's first reaction to seeing him still fear? Also, he seemed to really want to. "Miss Lin." Lulu pushed the door open with a pale face. One of her hands was hanging down, bleeding continuously. Her face was dirty, and tears were rolling down one by one. "Mr. Lu, he's killing people." I stared blankly at her, tightly clutching the quilt, trembling slightly with anger. "Lulu, get out of the way." I clenched my fists, feeling the change of my supernatural power in my body. Soon, one of my hands was flushed red with energy. Blue veins bulged, and the blood flow accelerated, as if it was about to fly out of my body. It hurt so much, really. It hurt so much. Forcing this move was indeed too much of a strain. Blood gradually stained my clothes. My fair skin was oozing with bewitching red. The feeling of being torn apart came back again. The scenes of being devoured by countless zombies kept pounding in my mind. Ah! Bang! I fell to the ground, my lips pale. Behind me was the electric net. Fortunately, it was successful. Lulu stood frozen in place, seeing me covered in blood. She trembled and came to help me. Forced to smile at her. "Don't be afraid, I'm fine." In the primary stage, my space-type supernatural power can store things, but as the level increases, it can finally move external objects or even people. But if the level isn't enough, it will cost a price like mine. Take me to find Lu Yao. The base that everyone had painstakingly built outside was severely damaged. Just like when the zombies massacred the city, the smell of blood filled the air again. Many familiar faces were lying on the ground, including people brought by Zhou Teng, and our own people. I had never been so angry. I picked up my gun and rushed into the basement. At the door, I heard Lu Yao's almost crazy voice. "Ha ha ha, Mr. Yang, don't tremble. Sister Qiqi asked me to get along well with you. I won't kill you at most. Take off your 2 legs. He lifted Yang's eyes. "Chin tsk, tisk, but I just want to crush you useless people to death when I see you. How can I get along well with you?" He sighed. "Sister Qiqi said she wants to protect you, but how can there be others by her side? She wants to find living people. I'll accompany her to find them. I'll turn all of you into dead people, and she won't have that thought anymore." There were many people in the basement. Uncle Yan, Aunt Zhou, Yang Zai, and Zhou Ting. I had never seen Zhou Ting Solangbei. He was covered in blood, his eyes half closed, and his hands were limp on the ground. "And you're the most hateful." Lu Yao grabbed Zhou Teng's collar. One of his hands was creaking. "You actually wanted to take her away? How could she go with you?" "No way." Zhou Ting opened his eyelids and looked at him, then laughed. His shoulders shook uncontrollably. Lu Yao's eyes were eerily red. There was an electric light on his antlers, and his eyes were covered with that layer of mist. Again, a few zombies slowly walked out from the dim corner. They walked in Lu Yao's direction, and finally stopped beside him. Sister Qiqi was right. Orcs are the darlings of heaven in the apocalypse. And not only have my own supernatural power, but also integrated the supernatural power of that deer. Coincidentally, this skill can bewitch the mind. He enunciated each word clearly. "Control zombies." No wonder every time I stared into his eyes, I would always give up my principles. Lu Yao directed the zombies to approach Zhou Teng. "Stop." I raised my gun and pointed it at him, just like the first time we met. Seeing me, the redness in Lu Yao's eyes gradually faded. A look of panic flashed across his face. "Sister Qiqi." "Shut up." I let my tears fall and stared at him firmly. "Let them go." Lu Yao frowned slightly. I turned the muzzle of the gun with the sound of gunfire in the basement. A zombie felly repeated, "Let them go." Lu Yao didn't speak. There was a crackling sound on his antlers. I continued to shoot, and took care of all the remaining zombies. He didn't even blink throughout the whole process. Finally, I pointed the gun at him. He smiled at me, just like he used to coax me. "Sister Qiqi, don't be angry. I'll do as you say." Then his tone changed. and he said casually, pointing at Zhou Teng. But this person has to die. Zhou Teng struggled to move his hands, and the ice that had just formed dissipated with his limp hands. He shook his head at me. Leave. Lu Yao, as if teasing, sneered lightly, overestimating your own abilities. I slowly lowered the gun. Why? I don't want to either. But you're going with him. You going to leave me behind? Lu Yao, I heard it all. His eyes were bloodshot. You're just like them. You all think I'm a burden. They abandoned me in the forest to fend for myself. You brought me out. And now you're going to leave me too? He looked at me with tears in his eyes, the veins on his forehead bulging, like a helpless tyrant. So he had heard my conversation with Zhou Teng before, but I was going to the northwest with Zhou Teng, just to get more arms for the base. I didn't know it would drive him crazy. Who were the they that Lu Yao mentioned? What on earth had he gone through? When I brought you out, I never thought of leaving you behind, and I've never regretted it, but you've done something wrong and deserve punishment. It was me who brought you here. In the final analysis, it's my fault we can't beat you, so punish me instead. I pointed the gun at myself. Lu Yao's pupils dilated. No. He reached out his hand. Sister Qiqi, don't will let them go. Don't shoot. Lu Yao, I remember once telling you that supernatural powers shouldn't be used against the same kind, but what about you? You killed your companions whom you had been living with day and night. Lu Yao blinked and smiled. But Sister Qiqi, they're not my kind. From the moment my parents threw me away, I wasn't human anymore. The day you met me, I wasn't saving any small animal at alley. Was just too hungry. I had just bitten into the deer's neck when the apocalypse started. I looked at him in disbelief, and the tears that kept falling were a mix of heartache and disappointment. Lu Yao stared at me for a while. He seemed to give in and sighed. Forget it. As I said, I'll do whatever you want. Before he finished speaking, his screams filled the basement. A stream of blood gushed out from the joint of his arm, and his arm lay on the ground. Half of his face was stained with his own blood, and he laughed maniacally. This murderous hand made you unhappy, so I removed it. Everyone in the basement remained silent. I also tightly clutched the clothes by my side. Only Lu Yao still blinked those eyes, looking at me expectantly. He dragged himself towards me, leaving a bloody footprint with each step. Don't be angry anymore. I raised my hand to wipe the blood from his eyes. His smile, which had just begun to spread, froze at my cold voice. Get out. Lu Yao had killed many people. Even if I let him stay, the others in Yin Town wouldn't agree, but I couldn't bring myself to kill him either. I stared into Lu Yao's eyes, and my voice echoed through every corner of the basement. Lu Yao has violated the regulations of the Yin Town base. He killed his companions and damaged public property as punishment. He has lost one arm, and will be expelled from the base. He is never allowed to enter the area within 10 li of the Yin Town base. I paused, and a stream of clear tears rolled down my face. Otherwise, I will commit suicide to atone for my sins. Lu Yao opened his mouth, but when he saw my clenched fist with my nails digging into the flesh and blood dripping down, he said nothing and accepted everything with his head lowered. Lu Yao left. No one went to see him off. On the day he left, I stood on the high tower and watched his figure gradually shrink until it finally disappeared. And Zhou's supernatural power had evolved again. Fortunately, with her around, Zhou Teng, Uncle Yin, and the others were not seriously injured. We were back to the beginning, cleaning up the wreckage, burying our companions, and rebuilding our home. Still not considering going back to the northwest with me? I shook my head. Zhou Teng, admit it. You never really believed in me. You came here with a purpose this time, didn't you? Zhou Teng's usual arrogant smile froze. He suppressed his smile, and his eyes were piercingly cold. He nodded. My principle is to only believe in myself, and always have some reservation about others. Is this the reason why you didn't choose me? I shook my head again. You're just like me. With clear goals, you'll stop at nothing to get what you want in your heart. I'll never be the most important person just because we're too alike. It would be so tiring to spend the rest of my life with someone exactly like myself. I want to live a more relaxed life. Zhou Teng lowered his eyes, seemingly lost in thought. I chuckled. So, a clearly priced transaction is more suitable for us. Come on. What's the real purpose of your visit this time? He lit a cigarette. The swirling smoke made him look even more languid, and also obscured his expression. It's easy to establish an organization in the apocalypse, but it's difficult to make it survive. I'm stuck at the first step, which is to feed my subordinates. The food we stockpiled following you before has been almost used up, so I'm here to ask for help. I wasn't surprised and asked, what's the price? Zhou Teng extinguished the cigarette. The military vehicles I brought are loaded with armsets in exchange of goods. I curled my lips. Deal. He sneered. Remember to prepare more cigarettes. That was the last one. Damn. I've never been this poor. We looked at each other and both laughed. When he was leaving, Zhou Teng called out to me. If I had been completely open with you back then, would we have a child by now? In your dreams. No matter how many times the if that Zhou Teng mentioned happened, the result would still be the same. He never did anything without benefits, and would never be completely open with anyone. As the days passed, everyone in Yin Town tacitly avoided talking about Lu Yao. It was as if what happened that day had never occurred. Everyone went about their business as usual, and smiles gradually appeared on their faces. By the way, the crystal nucleus found in the zombie's head had become the circulating currency in the apocalypse. After getting through the most difficult period, everyone started a new life. They could exchange crystal nuclei with labor, merits, or other contributions, and the crystal nuclei could be used to buy food, daily necessities, and even for spiritual consumption. Life was getting back on track day by day. I thought that was how it would be, but I didn't expect to meet them again 2 years after the zombie virus broke out. Major alliance bases were gradually established among them, the Northwest Alliance led by Zhou Teng, the Yin Town base led by me, and Lu Yao's orc zombie kingdom were the most powerful, and people kept joining them. Although these organizations had been established, there were still many people living in exile. In fear, their only choice to survive was to join one of these organizations, and the two people I met were acquaintances. Yangzai said that there were still some remaining zombies in the new scope of Yin Town's influence. I led a team to clear them out from a distance. I saw two people fighting. If I hadn't heard their voices, I wouldn't have believed that they were Lin Qiqi and Wang Yin. Let go. Let go. Bitch. Let go. This is mine. I found it. Give me back the egg. Give it back to me. Lin Qiqi held onto a broken egg tightly. She didn't let go even though Wang Yin was beating her until her head was bleeding. I never expected that my words back then would come true. There were a few zombies wandering around. Wang Yin grabbed her hand, gave her a hard kick, snatched the food, and ran away. The place where Lin Qiqi fell was right under the feet of the zombies. The zombies now had evolved several times. They were no longer as slow, reacting as they used to be. Raised my gun and fired, but it was too late. From a distance, Lin Qiqi's screams grew weaker and weaker. The zombie was killed, but the person under its mouth was on the verge of death. I stood in front of Lin Qiqi and looked down at her. Her face was disfigured. She couldn't even speak a complete word. When looking at me finally, she stared with her eyes wide open and took her last breath. A tear rolled down from the corner of her eye, washing a patch of clean skin on her face. Lin Qiqi. Wang Yin, holding the egg that Lin Qiqi had sacrificed her life for, stumbled over. He was stopped in his tracks by the people beside me pointing guns at him. He pointed at himself. It's me, Wang Yin. Have you forgotten? I curled the corners of my mouth. How could I forget? I once said that one day I would make you kneel at my feet. He was taken aback and smiled obsequiously. Okay, I sent it. Just kneeling to you? I'll kowtow to you. After saying that, he hugged my shoe and hit his head hard on the ground. Please save me. Don't want to be bitten by zombies. Please save me. It was all that bitch Lin Qiqi who instigated me to bully you. It has nothing to do with me. Don't want to die. I suddenly felt sad and sneered. Wang Yin, when you pushed me into the zombie horde, did you ever think that I was also scared? He suddenly looked up, his eyes full of confusion. At that time, I also hoped that you would save me, but you personally sent me into the mouths of the zombies to be torn apart. Do you know how painful that was? Wang Yin stepped back as if looking at a devil. I didn't chase after him as he ran, because a group of zombies was coming from the opposite side. This place was so similar to the place where I died before. The only difference was that this time I didn't have to endure that kind of pain anymore. I squatted down. Behind me were Wang Yin's screams, and in front of me was Lin Qiqi's body. I took a piece of clothing and covered her with it. When the sounds behind me disappeared, I ordered the others to clean up the zombies. The scope of Yin Town's influence was expanding. More and more people outside discovered a strange thing. The orc zombie organization adjacent to Yin Town would retreat 10 li every time Yin Town expanded a little. This unwritten rule had lasted for many years until Lulu's child was old enough to run errands. I never saw Lu Yao again. He kept our promise very well. Auntie Lin, why do you always like to stand on the high tower and sigh? I picked up the little kid on the ground and took out a lollipop with my bare hand, because Auntie is not happy. Is there someone who's been disobedient and made Auntie angry? Then we won't give him any candy. Auntie can be sweet by herself. After saying that, the little guy stuffed the candy into my mouth. By the way, Auntie, I found this at the door. I'm giving it to you. In her hand lay a deer antler carved from wood, with a bolt of lightning also carved on it. My mouth was sickeningly sweet, yet I also felt a bitter taste.